are back already with more on your history. There are two time periods that have held fascination with many of you for a long time, and that is ancient Egypt and the time of Jesus Christ. We will spend a little time on those two sagas now, without forgetting the South American and native North American story, to be given at a later date. The so-called battle between light and dark continued after the destruction of Atlantis. Your world seemed to seesaw between periods of brief enlightenment, followed by times of corruption and relative darkness. Egypt was a case in point. A group of seventh-density Pleiadians, determined to restore the blueprint of humanity, long lost to Orion, Draco, Sirian, and Ramadan and other renegade groups, took advantage of the fact that the few survivors of Atlantis were relatively pure in heart and mind. Those that landed along the Nile River were the first to be visited by the Pleiadian Welcoming Committee. This contingent was headed by a teacher later named the Thu, contrary to ancient writings, did not have the head of a bird or reptile. The creature depicted as such was a Draco and Ramadan hybrid who came along much later and corrupted the teachings of the Thu. The Thu was a radiant being of blue-white light, a humanoid with similar color and energy to ourselves in the higher realms. He was able to step his vibration down far enough to communicate directly with the descendants of Atlantis and to teach them in the ways of truth, cooperation, harmony and higher mathematics. As many channeled writings will confirm, the Thu was the engineer behind the Great Pyramid. This device served several purposes, but its primary function was an ascension chamber and controller of Earth's grid system. As correctly pointed out by your Egyptologists, it was aligned with Mintaka, the central star in Orion's belt. Mintaka became the central point in Orion's enlightened government following the resolution of the Rigel-Betelgeuse Wars about 100,000 years ago. Mintaka also had geographical and geological significance in that it indicated a central axis point of Earth's precession of grand cycles, occurring every 25,920 years approximately. The grid system of Earth was correlated with the point at Giza being the center of the grid, and ley lines and vortexes coming off at various sacred geometric angles therefrom. The Martians, during their heyday, had a similar grid system constructed at the same latitude and longitude on their planet, also engineered by seventh-density Pleiadians, but alas, that never achieved its potential as a portal for ascension, due to interference from the Orion and Draco factions. Another strategic purpose of the Great Pyramid was to serve as an incoming portal for groups of Pleiadians so that the purity and vision of the original blueprint would have a fighting chance of getting re-established on Earth. The Thu and his group had a fair degree of success in working with the Atlanteans to construct temples of initiation and soul evolution along the banks of the Nile. Of the several thousand Atlanteans who made this area their home, a significant percentage took part in the ascension activities and initiations in the Great Pyramid. The seventh-density Pleiadians constructed the device in a matter of days, using levitation and laser technology. The series of passageways were designed to accommodate those who needed extended periods inside the device in order to accelerate their ascension templates when preparation for moving into fifth-density light bodies. The subterranean chambers beneath the Giza Plateau were already inhabited by those who had escaped underground during previous conflagrations. The Pleiadians, in concert with these underground groups, established the Hall of Records several thousand feet below the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx was later erected by another group of Egyptians to mark the entrance to the portal. The pyramid was completed in approximately 10,500 BC. It has only been in the last 20 years that scientists on your world have correctly dated the Great Pyramid. Until recently it was assumed this device was linked to various other pyramids that were constructed using the labor of the Egyptian people to serve as tombs for the pharaohs. This channel goes into detail in his book on lame attempts by later Egyptians to reconstruct the ascension chambers after Egypt had fallen to the Syrians. We will have more on that later. Accounts from adepts of the original mystery schools of this can be found sporadically in various stone tablets and channeled writings, including the emerald tablets. Essentially, they document the initiations given to prepare the fourth density souls for ascension into fifth density. Ancient Egypt thrived until about 7500 BC. At which time seventh-density Syrians from the Sirius B star system arrived on the scene and began unraveling the work of Thoth and his group. The Christian, Jewish and Greek legends and myths are all about the Syrians. Although these factions had great technological and psychic power, they had not resolved their egoic issues satisfactorily and as a result, became infatuated with worship and praised by their underlings. In other words, they were on a guru trip, to quote a popular phrase. At first it was subtle. They demonstrated their miraculous powers to those who did not have the spiritual understanding to see through the charade. As they intermingled and interbred, the DNA of the descendants became more and more polluted with their brand of egoistic messiahship. The mystery schools began to devolve into pecking orders and devotion to Syrian gods. The God of the Old Testament, Jehovah, was a seventh-density Syrian. Those of you familiar with Jehovah's teachings, but unwilling to accept the premise that Jehovah was an egotistical Syrian, should examine the result of Jehovah's presence on the earth. As stated many times by this channel, the Old Testament is one of the bloodiest and most violent books ever written. Would a highly evolved, enlightened being pit one race against another? Would he order blind obedience to his principles? Would he exalt some over others? In God's universe, there are no elite or chosen ones. Everyone is chosen and is created in pure love and innocence. Everyone has equal value in the eyes of God, and that value is infinite. Biblical scholars, Jewish and Christian clerics on your world need to go back to basics and examine the results of ancient teachings. Did they promote peace and evolution of awareness, or did they promote division and conflict? We, the founders, seldom preach, but this point is too important to let pass. Now on with the show. We return you to Egypt during its fall into worship and sacrifice. At the same time as the Syrian invasion after 7500 BC, the Orions and Dracos began arriving on the scene, and a degree of interbreeding ensued, resulting in many of the part reptilian, part avian, part human forms depicted in later Egyptian drawings. The bird people were a hybrid Draco-Andromedan race, the result of creative DNA engineering, and they attempted to land their native forms on the earth, with partial success. They, like the Syrians, used their superior technology and psychic powers to enslave the docile inhabitants of Egypt. You can find drawings of the Syrian and Draco-Andromedan gods on the walls of caves throughout Egypt. The pure in heart and mind, seeing the experiment once again go awry, sadly retreated back to the inner planes, and a period of relative darkness descended over Egypt. The ritual sacrifices, mummies, and mystery schools of the pharaohs were all the manifestation of Syrian, Orion, Draco and Andromedan corruption of the original Pleiadian teachings. Had the teachings of Thoth been fully integrated by his students, they never would have been corruptible. The lesson here should be obvious by now. Unless you have fully integrated your ego and higher consciousness, you can be led astray by seemingly well-meaning teachers who themselves have not integrated their egos with spirit.